Good morning from Something Sweet and Merry Christmas. We are full on in Christmas prep. Got some orders. Sweet friend wants some sweet treats that I'm getting ready to make for her, and I've got a cake due out tomorrow, so I've got some things to do, which always makes me happy if I have things to do in the kitchen. But this morning, starting out this morning, I'm going to make a recipe that has terrific meaning to me and mine. Uh, Way back, well, when I first got married, my mother in law, Granny Freeman, she became Granny Freeman to everybody, uh, made cookies. She called them tea cakes. When I think about tea cakes, I think of a thick, cakey kind of cookie, but that's not what these were. And we all loved them. She would make recipe after recipe after recipe of them around the holidays, and she kept them in big plastic mayonnaise jars, and they were tucked away everywhere, but we knew where they were. There was no hiding them from us. We knew where they were, and we drug them out, and the only bad thing I can think of about them is that they're addictive. You can eat a lot of them at a time because they're crunchy and they're buttery. They almost taste like a really good pound cake in a cookie. But we just took for granted that we would always have Granny Freeman tea cakes. But as time went by, she got to the point she really couldn't make them anymore, and then she passed away, and that recipe was just kind of gone, and we didn't have tea cakes anymore. She lived with my family for several years before she died, and we were going through some of her things long after she had passed away, and I found that tea cake recipe that she had written down in her own handwriting. And I thought, well, if Granny Freeman can make those tea cakes, I can too. So I made a batch, and we were so excited. My children were excited. We were so excited about it. It was sometime around the holidays. So for that Christmas, I made there were my husband and two brothers. So for each family, I made tea cakes and tucked the recipe in so that that recipe wouldn't die with that generation. And I realized just this week that I hadn't made those tea cakes in a long time, and I miss them. So, in honor of the Freeman family, especially of Granny Ruth Freeman, this morning I'm going to make her famous tea cakes. So, I'm going to get all my ingredients together, and I'll bring you back when we're ready to mix. It's not hard, kind of time consuming, but it's not hard. See you back in a minute. Well, after only about 4 tries, we got one pan baked. A couple of things. I told you it's been a while since I made this recipe. I turned the oven down to 425 because I had never baked these cookies in this oven, but it takes 450. So we've bumped the temperature up to 450. We had to cook these longer, and they're still not as brown on the bottom as I like for them to be, but aren't they pretty? They're such pretty cookies. And after a little while, they're kind of soft when they come out of the oven, but after they've been out a little while, they'll get crispy, and they are delicious with a cup of coffee or without a cup of coffee or whenever you'd like to have them. So right now we have some in the oven. We have a dozen cookies here. We have a dozen cookies in the oven. We have another dozen cookies cut. And there's at least a couple more dozen to cook, to roll and cook. So when we get through, I'll tell you how many we've got. But first, shouldn't we taste one? You think it'd be a good idea to taste one? Is it a good day to remember Granny Freeman? Every day's a good day to remember Granny Freeman. So we're going to take this one, we're going to break it in half, and I'm going to give half of it to Sabrina, and we're going to take a bite. That's like walking down memory lane. Can't wait for you to see the whole batch. We'll be back soon. We're back with our ingredients. We've got our KitchenAid mixer. This is a thick dough, and there's a lot of it, so you can do it with a hand mixer, but if you have a stand mixer, I would pull it out. I want to show you something before we start. I got these a while back, but I really haven't used them. They're measuring cups. A half cup is the biggest one. You see that? What I love about this is that it will fit down into my canisters and pull stuff up without having to get out a whole big measuring spoon. It's a good scoop and measurer at the same time. You know, I have an Amazon wish list, and it goes all the way down to 1/8 of a cup. So these are just super handy little things. You know where I got them. I got them at Amazon. I get everything at Amazon. They're really handy. Another thing I have on my wish list, which is probably the Guinness Book of World Records longest wish list in the world, is a measuring cup that also weighs. So you can put your things in a measuring cup, and it tells you in grams or ounces or whatever metric system, whatever system you're using, it'll do that. Okay, enough about that. I could talk about equipment all day because I love it. I need 3 kitchens and no bedrooms because that's where I want all my stuff. The first thing we're going to use for this is 2 sticks of butter. I'm using salted. You can use unsalted. If you do use unsalted, I would recommend putting in a pinch of salt. So we'll use that, 2 sticks of butter, 2 cups of granulated sugar, a teaspoon, I think, of baking powder, 3 eggs. I don't have them over here yet because I didn't get them put out to get to room temperature, but that's another little thing you can do. If you don't get your eggs out to room temperature, you can put the whole egg, obviously not cracked, the whole eggs in some warm water and leave them for a little while, and it'll bring them up to room temperature. So we've got those getting to room temperature, and it takes 5 cups of plain flour. And I said baking, it's baking powder, and of course some vanilla. That 5 cups of flour can sometimes vary based on what it's like outside, how much liquid stuff there might be in your butter, how big your eggs are. You have to kind of be able to tell by looking when the dough is stiff enough, because you're going to pull it out and roll it out thin. It's got to be able to be rolled. And obviously you'll use more flour when you do that. I'm going to tell you kind of the process, and then I'm going to turn off the camera and get the dough made, and then I'll show it to you when it's done. I'll put the butter and the sugar in the mixer and let it cream completely together. Then I will add the eggs one at a time, and then I'll start spooning in the flour. And I'll show you the dough and show you what it's supposed to look like. I'll tell you a little bit more about this, but when you roll that first batch, because you're going to roll batch after batch, and I'll show you about that in a minute, it's hard to roll it. Sometimes I have to cut them, pull them all back together, roll them again. That first dough is very tender and soft, and it's harder to roll. I cut mine just in round cookies. You know why? Because that's how Granny Freeman did it. Granny Freeman's were always round. So that's how we do them. You can make them in Christmas shapes. You can use any kind of cookie cutter you want, but they're not Granny Freeman's tea cakes if they're not round for us. So I'm going to get this batter mixed together, and it's really more of a dough, and I'll bring you back when it's done and show you what it looks like. I've got my dough mixed, and you can see it's stiff. I've taken my spatula and scraped all the way, especially in a stand mixer. It's easy for there to be stuff hiding down in the bottom, and you don't want that to be true. So you just want to make sure you've scraped it all together into one dough. Now, what I'm going to do in just a minute, I'm going to turn this off and put out my pastry mat and get my rolling pin. I will pull off a piece of this, put some flour on there, semi-knead it till I get it to the point that I'm able to roll it thin. I've got 2 big cookie sheets lined with parchment paper. I've got the oven on 425. And so we will cook them. It only takes about 5 minutes, and you have to watch them very carefully or they'll burn. I will tell you that I've eaten a few pretty crisply burned ones, and they still taste great. Another thing I was thinking about when I was mixing these is how I made sure the butter was at room temperature and the eggs were at room temperature, and I mixed everything in order. When I was a young woman and I was making these cookies, I threw it all in the mixer and mixed it up, and guess what? Those cookies tasted fine. I do want to follow the correct procedure, but I just think that sometimes we worry a little bit too much about that. I'll come back and show you these rolled and getting them on the pan. I use the 2 big pans because that way I can be rolling a pan while one pan is cooking, and then rotate like that and keep them going, because it makes about 5 dozen cookies. So you'll have a lot of cookies when you're finished. Be back with you in just a minute. And I have the first of the dough on my pastry mat, and I've worked, see how much flour I have on there? It takes a good bit. I sprinkled flour on the top because this can be a sticky dough. And I've just got that little bit of dough worked into just a round disc. I've got a bowl of flour here to use because we will need it. I do not guarantee that this first rolling will produce any cookies that we can put on pans. So we will just have to wait and see. We could have to gather it all together and it'll stiffen a little bit more with the flour, and then we'll roll it again. So we're going to start rolling. We want this to be pretty thin. I try to pick it up every so often, turn it over so that it doesn't stick to the pastry mat. Roll it again. I don't know if I can turn that one over. I don't think I can. Well, why we have all those creases? Let's see if we can't get those work together. We're going to roll the dough to pretty thin. We're going to have a cookie sheet over here so we can put the cookies on it. This is the point we have to cross our fingers and hope that we get some cookies that we can get on the cookie sheet. I've rolled that pretty thin. If you've got a rolling pin that has the guards, you might decide on a depth, a thickness of the dough and use those. Not doing it that scientifically today. Let's see if we can cut some. I've used this size. And my daughter and I were going, what size do we want them? Those look like Granny Freeman's. So this is the one we're using. You can do any one you'd like. We'll cut, see if we can pick that up. Look at that. We have our first tea cake ready to go on the pan. I'm going to fill the first pan and I'll show you what it looks like when they're done. We have our first pan of cookies ready to go in the oven. I want to explain to you how not to get discouraged because I had to roll dough 3 times before these came out. It takes those first few times to get the dough to the point that it'll stay together. Really flour your surface really, really well. I'm going to put these in the oven and I'm going to bring my other pan over and try to get another pan ready to go in when this pan comes out. So get them in the oven. See you back in just a few minutes. So in about an hour, we've got this whole process practically finished. We came out with 5 dozen cookies, a mess, but 5 dozen delicious tea cakes. Some of them are still in the oven and still in process, but they'll all go in an airtight container and they'll last for weeks, but I've never tested that theory because they always disappear well before that happens. So I'll let you know if they really last that long. There are a lot of people that are going to get some as gifts at Christmas. So they'll go. In fact, there can be another recipe in my future. It's one thing I want to show you. In the bottom of my mixing bowl, you can see, did I tell you to be sure to scrape it all up and make sure you didn't have anything left in the bottom? I did. And I thought I did, but I still had some stuff left. So be really careful, especially if you're mixing in a stand mixer, and make sure you scrape all that good stuff up out of the bottom. I had some stuff left that I couldn't roll, but it's not very much. I still got 5 dozen cookies. But we will enjoy these, and we'll be back later. We've got several more things to make today. So in the next few days, keep your eye out for some videos coming. And Merry Christmas. I hope you're having the best holiday season with your family. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Put comments, put the cookies that are important in your family at this time of year. I would love to hear about what you do. So if you would subscribe and like this video, it would help me a lot and I would really appreciate it. I love being with you guys. It's so much fun. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, Merry Christmas.